Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the budget workshop for July 14th. It is 5:31, so I apologize we're a minute late. We will do an invocation. Mr. Christian, could you do that for us, please? And the Pledge of Allegiance immediately following. Please rise.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to do a budget presentation tonight. We've got the enterprise funds, the pension trust funds, police, firefighters, and general employees, and the internal service funds. So, Mr. Minner, please.
All right, so here we go. Hopefully we'll wrap up the fiscal year 21 budget this evening. So we'll jump right to the enterprise funds, and the first one is the granddaddy of them all, the electric fund. Electric fund, in a nutshell, for fiscal year 21 is aggressive. So wanted to bring you kind of through the electric fund at the 50,000 level foot and give you the highlights first. So first off is the $15 million debt proceeds that we approved actually last night, and basic three reasons for that. One is the cash management approach. I got a chart at the end of the electric presentation which really puts in a picture what we're trying to accomplish. And then that $15 million does two things. It pays us back for our cash investments that we did for the substations, which is really a 30-year investment. And number two, it helps us do the villages expansion, which is about a little over a $9 million project. But I think it's important to note too, in that $9 million, probably a little bit over half of that number goes to system improvements. So we come out of North Substation and Center Substation with line feeders to loop the system that have more than just a benefit for Villages customers, which is another good reason for the justification of the debt and the cash management approach. The next big thing to look at is the electric department is a little bit bigger this year. We've got about $710,000 of new expenses, and those break down into two areas. First, personal services and the operating expenses. Personnel services are up about $500,000, attributable to about four reasons. One, our capital plan is a little bit smaller, even though we've got a bunch of stuff going on. So there's about $175,000. I'll point over here so the audience can see. Ooh, yeah, hold on a sec. Let me come back. Okay, so first off is the personnel services, $110,000, a little bit bigger. $176,000, that's attributable to capital. What we do is we allocate our personnel expenses into capital funds for capital projects. So because we were a little bit smaller this year, there's not quite that much allocation. So operations eats a share of the personnel costs. Second is the insurance increases of about $83,000, a little bit more overtime of $86,000. And the merit and journeyman promotions. Remember, in the electric department, there's a number of the employees who are in the journeyman program. So they have built-in steps as they proceed from training to journeyman. So that's a little bit more than the 3% expense for us there. Operating is about $200,000 increased, and that's due to a little bit more pole inspections, about $31,000 worth. We also have some equipment for new pieces of equipment, 115 grand, and we also have the meter change outs, about 80 grand there. Three more categories to show the increases in electric. Smart grid division. There was a clause in the GE contract that when we hit 26,000 customers, our cost per meter went up. So we are estimating that we're going to hit that 26,000 electric customers this fiscal year. So that's going to account for about a $400,000 increased payment in our GE contract. And then also, there's the other divisions, miscellaneous stuff, 636,000, which breaks down into, you've got the new debt payment, and then you've also have a decrease to the general fund of about $400,000, and then some reserve money is in there too. So at the end of the day, I think that's a really pretty aggressive, well, I'll talk more here about capital programs. We've got the debt issue, we've got growth, we've got new transformers, and with all of that, we were still able to reduce the rate by 86 cents for your first 1,000, which it's not a big increase, but that's where you got your reduction to the transfer and a little bit of some quid pro quo there as we've tried to.
Could you go back to the first one of smart grid, please? So we've got to continue paying more and more money for this smart grid. Are we going to recoup any of that money, or is it now pretty much a dead project?
It's a finished project, and the costs that we pay are pursuant to the contract.
Right.
And so it was an increase. So long story short, if I remember this number correctly, when we went from smart grid, when we went from the traditional grid to the smart grid, we did the $20 million project. I want to say, I'm looking at Steve, our costs went, say, $1 a meter to about $3.50 a meter-ish. Is that about right? That's what so that increase was associated with the smart grid. And then pursuant to the contract, when we hit that threshold of customer numbers,
I understand that, but did we get any money back?
No, you're not getting any money back.
Okay, so all along, we never recouped any of that money?
No.
Well, that is right, certainly. But there are system improvements. I'm not saying it was a good idea, but it's not like there were no benefits to it.
Look,
that would be.
It was prefaced on the recoup part, okay? It was prefaced on the peak shaving. So we started doing peak shaving, and probably the first 2 years, we got about $4 million back. And then that stopped because of two reasons. One, EPA notified some of the big customers and said that you couldn't use your backup generation as much because of pollutant issues. And two, we had the big fight with FMPA about shaving the peak and pushing the load to the demand load back to other customers. And that happened 14-15.
Okay.
And once that happened, we got everything we were going to get as far as a return, and then we just had the system improvements. I think we are in year 5 or 6 of the 15-year contract. 2026, the GE contract's done. And so at that time, we'll have opportunity to reevaluate how we'll do our meter reading, whether we stay with GE, whether we find a different way to do it, what have you. So that's a few years out.
Thank you.
On the smart grid, it says that $4 a meter for 26,000 meters, so that's like a little over 100 grand, but it's going up almost 400 grand. What's the rest of it? It says $4 a meter.
I didn't have that much. I had $4 a meter. I had about 84 grand associated with the.
So we got.
So yeah, but so where's the rest of the increase coming from? Because the budget increase is like 300 and something thousand, 400,000, something like that.
The contract does go up some outside of the increase in meters, so there is a little bit of increase. Yeah, plus, yeah.
I'll get a better
Yeah, we can.
right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the other cost in there we wanted to hit real quick was the wholesale costs. So you've got about $170 million budget. Of that, almost 38 million is what you pay to FMPA, which is 22% of your budget. So that's like one line in that 500-page book is this number. So I just wanted to spend just 2 seconds on how we come up with that number. And it's basically kind of three-pronged. We look at kind of our history on what our margin is in the electric versus our revenue versus the historic power cost from FMPA, and we just kind of merge all these together. Each different color is a different fiscal year, and then the dotted red line is about what the trend is with a little bit of growth, and that's how we come up with the power cost number. Less some reduction that we came. So we run it internally, we use Doug Hanley to also help us out with it, and that's important number. A lot of work goes into that one number. From a revenue side, pretty much we look at a little bit of growth, but again, even though there's a decrease of the 71 to the 68, that number really flexes based on weather conditions, based on consumption, based on usage. So the 68 million actually does take into account the reduction that we're anticipating from FMPA, as well as a big state grant that helped us put in some of the undergrounding on Dixie.
Is that the intergovernmental revenue?
The 800, yes.
800,000?
Mm-hmm.
On the revenue side, the it's like for the Fruitland Park public, it's like 293,000. Do we have any idea what we expect that to be kind of at build out?
Which number is that?
That's it's in the revenue. It's a public authority, Fruitland Park.
That refers to municipal government facilities.
Oh, that's just theirs. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
So that's it. What?
that's the municipal facilities. That's
Why
not-
did that jump so much?
I don't know exactly.
Okay.
Without-
They've built a couple new facilities over there, so.
Okay.
Didn't they build a library and something else recently?
Yeah, that's right. They did. Okay, that makes sense. So the Fruitland Park section of the villages, that's just built into the residential number then? Okay, thank you.
And then that's the overview. We kind of hit it a little bit to start out with. Your St. Lucie power bill is about 1.2. The FMPA is 3.6. You add these two numbers together, that's the 38 million. And then everything is broke down into those categories. I wanted to talk now a little bit too about capital projects. So let me jump. We've got about 4.3 million in capital. That's about our typical amount that we spend each year in capital, mixed between the standard kind of, and so this chart, it kind of blends everything together. And to unblend it, the easy explanation is a lot of this is kind of SOP, transformer change out, transformers go bad, general kind of just maintenance routine, kind of just like in the water and sewer department when we're changing out our lift stations and pumps and meters. And then other stuff of this is line upgrades, line extensions, and that kind of stuff that all fit into that. So what we did is we tried to break it out into capital projects, so you can kind of, from that 4.3, whatever we don't mention as a capital project is a routine capital project. So these are the projects that we've identified, and most of them are upgrades or a little bit of extensions. So you've got a conductor on Pine Ridge, you've got a conductor on 27, estimated 3 new subdivisions in this line. 25 new commercial services, 150 new rental for lights, some feeder replacements, and then switches, and plus I put down in here the village of Carter, which was 9 million. We talked about that coming out of the gate. So if you put it in a map, it looks system improvements. So the Village of Carter is over this area right in here on our system now. So the 9 million is getting out there both ways, and then we try to map out and do a long-term plan of capital improvements.
On the conductor of the Pine Ridge Dairy, it says it's to help switch load during emergencies. Could you explain that a little bit?
We did a contingency plan to determine if we lose parts of the city system, that how can we pick that up? And we recognized in that a section up there on Pine Ridge Dairy Road in Bruce Park that is a hindrance to us being able to pick load back up from a different direction. So it gives us more capability, more capacity on the system to be able to move load around during the emergency.
Thank you.
So to wrap up electric, I wanted to just go back and look at your cash reserves. So you've seen, we've stayed steady essentially in the electric fund around 20 million. In 15, we were about 16 million, 19 million, so a little bit of growth, 20 million. We stayed at 20 million for about 2 years, and then we dropped off to 14 or 16 million. This gap was when we took the 4 million out for the transformers. So we took that out, paid cash for it, because we thought, okay, we have the cash, that's a good investment, no debt, long-term 30-year solution, and pretty much as plan goes, once you make that kind of plan, something comes up that you didn't expect, which was the village's growth and the swap with Duke. So we dealt with the debt, the franchise agreements, and your territorial agreement's going to come around. So when that happened, then we started working with the villages on the plan of the Carter development. And so that's where, if we didn't do the debt, we would anticipate from now until about early spring 21, we called it April 21, you would see a cash spend off of 9 million. So that would bring you actually down to 7 million. Your reserve requirement is 8. So that's not good. The growth is good, but we don't want to be in that cash position. Our development agreement is we pay back the delta change between what the standard system is and the upgrades is, but we're also taking the opportunity to fix existing systems. So that's where that number gets. So what do? Because money is so inexpensive right now, the debt issue is I think a great cash solution, because you pretty much stay whole and the revenue that you get from the villages pays for that debt, so you're allowed to stay in a good cash position. So what happens here is this is the 20 million, then we drop off, we buy the transformers, and then next month we add the 15 million. We estimated going down 100 grand between now and the end of the fiscal year, and then between the fiscal year and that April, you're right back to 22 million where we started out before we did the transformers. Because what that 15 did was, A, it covers the village's expansions, the system improvements, and then allows you to replenish your cash for the transformers and keeps you in a good, healthy position in a debt payment that we've already weaved into the budget, which does assume only some of the Carter growth. So I think it's an aggressive plan for the electric department, but I think it's aggressive, but I think it's reasonable.
So I just had some general questions on the electric fund. There's a pretty good increase in communications in the admin division. Do we know what that's for?
That's going to be the SCADA.
Most of it's wireless communication. It's the 26,750.
Mm-hmm.
Most of that is the wireless, Verizon wireless communication. Is that for the AP or is that just for the?
Okay. And then the contract services of $151,000 in the distribution division, what services are those?
Contract services.
Yes, sir.
We had,
Yeah, the bulk of that, Al, is the 46,000. That's basically the IVR system that we have. Annually, we have to pay for that to be hosted off-site to provide that interconnection between our CIS system and the customer. Within that, all right, where's that, 55.5? 55.5 of that is for inspecting, what, 3,200 poles, 3,100 poles next year.
Okay.
Part of our 8-year, we have an 8-year plan to inspect and treat all the wood distribution poles. So we've got to finish up that 8 year. This is the last grouping of that. So
Okay.
55.5 is related to the.
Thank you.
Okay. And then, I guess for Al, the uncollectible accounts, we get a little bit less than we did the actual for 2018. Are you expecting to take the COVID hit in the current fiscal year, or?
We probably won't actually write that off until next year, because we usually hold those accounts for a year and try to collect them
So you're
before we write them off. But we will see, on the commercial side, a fairly good,
So if that goes up to 500, we just gonna absorb it from cash, or?
yeah, we won't have any problem absorbing it. That's not going to
So it would be in the 2020, 2021
be,
budget
yes,
year?
right.
Let me ask you a question. On one of the accounts, which is a restaurant, they already were $20,000 of non-payment like that. Yes.
They're only slightly above that. Right now, I think their total out is 30,000. Before the COVID outbreak, we got with Brick and Barrel, put them on a payment plan. As soon as they made their first payment on that outstanding amount that you mentioned, COVID hit. Their debt hasn't increased substantially above that number. They have now come back and written us a notice that they can't afford to pay, and we'll be cutting them off probably in the next few weeks.
Okay. It's got to be done. I mean, they were
Yep.
very much, in arrears before this thing started. Thank you.
So, you think we don't need to make an adjustment on the budget, we'll just make an adjustment down the road to the uncollectible accounts, or do we need to account for that in the budget?
We'll take another look at this. There might be a couple spots in there where we can tighten up. So if we can increase that line, we'll do it. So let us take another look-see. Specifically, the question you brought up earlier about the GE contract, we want to go back and take a look at that number. If there's some wiggle room in that, we'll shift those numbers and we'll put that money into the account loss.
Okay. So that's all my questions.
Okay, gas revenues.
Okay, so off to the gas fund. Gas is essentially pretty much the same as last year. Kind of the same philosophies on what the purchases are and your typical operations costs around $500,000, and then your cash graph. So gas is actually starting to make a slow comeback. We've been leaning on the cash for a number of capital projects, and then we use some more cash to do the extension with the villages and the South Sumter gas utility contract. And now we're starting to see that growth start to come back as Carter develops and the villages starts pushing down South Sumter. I really expect your cash number to start increasing. That's our gas report. By the way, Jack would be with us tonight. He had a doctor's appointment. So actually, gas was planned for Thursday, but I wanted to get Public Works done.
So we're not seeing any income growth this year from the additional hookups in the villages?
We do have a little bit at Carter in there and a little bit of growth.
I guess we're only showing $4,000 extra in net income.
Not much.
Okay, when do, I guess what does, do you know what the trajectory looks like there?
April.
April, okay. So,
In April, and then in April it grows, and then we're growing at that, say, what's our number count? I think we're like 200 a month.
okay, so the next year's budget should have a pretty bigger number there.
It should.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Thank you. I think we're going to the airport.
Airport is I don't know if status quo is a good word or not, but airport's pretty typical of other years. The big project there is the fuel farm, the apron, and the automated terminal equipment, and then and we've got the grant funding that helps cover those projects. And then on a cash basis, the airport's still sitting on much of that cash from the Jenkins sale.
Do we need another person there to help with the maintenance? Because there seems to be an awful lot of things that need to be done over there as far as cleanup.
I think that's the first I've heard of that complaint. I haven't heard that before. Tracy
Okay.
hasn't expressed that to me. I can have a conversation with her. My knee-jerk reaction is probably not.
Okay. Do we just need better supervision there?
I would again say probably not. It sounds like maybe we need to have a sidebar, so you're kind of catching me off guard with that complaint. Other than the pond issue, which we
Right.
put some money in to get that cleaned up, I haven't heard any complaints about missed maintenance or, I'm assuming
Okay,
when
if
you
you
say
just check
maintenance,
into
you're
it.
talking about infields not getting cut.
Right.
And I have not heard that complaint to date.
Okay, well, just check into it, please. When is the pond going to be finished?
I think the pond is almost done. Tracy's putting in a change order for about $3,000.
And that'll include all the hydrilla and everything else that's there?
The hydrilla has been sprayed.
Okay,
They'll come back and clear that out. There's still some floating grasses that they'll be taking out. But what's left of the trees, most of them do stay, except the unsightly one behind my building, which was hit by lightning, that's coming out. But otherwise, the scope that we gave them was 4-inch in diameter or greater, the trees stay. And they're also keeping the palmettos, which are more brownish color, but those are native, and so they need to stay.
okay.
I was by
Congratulations on
there, I guess, today or yesterday. I'm thinking the pond's looking much improved. Again, I haven't received much feedback on that, so.
Okay, thank you.
Which building
It
are
looks a
we
lot
doing
better.
this HVAC replacement?
The city-owned Skybolt, their term is up January of 2021.
Their term is up January. Why are we putting in a new HVAC system in?
I think that's in there in case we need to do anything to it. We have talked with Skybolt about renewing, and that's their requirement pursuant to the existing lease, to encourage them to re-up and pay more of a market-based rate. We tried to entice them with shifting the AC unit, so that's in there as a placeholder. If Skyball ultimately does leave when their term is up, we'll have to take a look-see on whether we move forward with that replacement or not. Or if, Skybolt comes back and they start talking again, we'll try to use the AC replacement as an encouragement to get the lease up to a more market value.
Okay, that's over the threshold that would come back to us.
Well,
What'd you put?
75,000.
75. Yeah,
Like-
about right at it.
They have eight units,
Okay.
for a total of 50, how do you refer to it, lots, what do you?
I don't, bottom line is if you want that improvement to come back to you before we move forward
I
with
would.
it.
I'd like want to know
that's
what's going
fine.
on with the lease and the whole thing.
Okay,
The
well-
whole scenario would want it to come back. I don't have a problem with what you're saying, but yeah, I think that's something we should discuss.
We'll make a note on that in the budget, that needs to come, that AC improvements needs to come back to commission.
Thank you.
Not
Any
that
other
I-
airport
I guess
questions?
it's not really a budget issue, but can we just touch on the customs office?
Customs office is in a bit of flux. Some of the feedback I have gotten from the airport board through Tracy has been that the airport board would like to see customs. I would advise the commission that customs for the city is a loss leader. Where we're at right now is our existing agreement with the villages is about $125,000 a year. We have a very nominal usage fee that we pay back to the villages. I don't think that generates a whole lot of cash, but we have an existing agreement with the villages on that customs office. Customs office has done, kind of had two big hiccups, or three big hiccups. One is they are requiring about $200,000 to $300,000 of improvements to their facility to meet Homeland Security standards. Two, they have informed us that their cost to operate will be adjusted, which they're doing nationwide based on a cost structure. That cost, an actual cost structure, actually what it costs Homeland Security to run customs is what our fee will be. That cost is going up among all the airports. We estimate that our costs will go from 125 to somewhere between 170 to 200,000. We don't know what that number is going to be. And third, the FAA has restricted international flights. So with the international flights restricted, the villages has requested that customs not be renewed. The FAA quarterly gave us the opportunity to do that. And so I think July 1, is that when we started? The temporary suspension. The Homeland Security will be getting back with us when we want to consider opening that back up. And when we get that word from Homeland Security, we will then get back with the villages. I think that the initial intel that we've gotten from the villages is there's probably some question whether they want to continue that operation, at what levels, how they want to split international travel amongst our customers. Most of our international travel is associated with probably 3 entities. So I think the city probably needs to have a hard look at if we continue customs and if the villages doesn't want to continue paying the full freight there, which also is understandable. Does the city want to pick that up if we can't get any other partners to dance with us? So depending on how much the villages wants to do, it's probably going to dictate where you go with that number. So, I mean, you could be looking at being at the whole, I mean, that number could be anywhere from $25,000 to $175,000 a year. And so I wouldn't suggest the airport do that. Because then instead of having that $3 million for capital, you're gonna spend it off having customs, which is not used by the region, but specific group of people. So I think the customs office consideration is to be continued.
Is this where Melbourne would take over then?
I think it's going to be up to the flying traffic and probably how they go in and out. Tracy and my guess is that, yeah, Melbourne's probably the next best location. You pop into Melbourne. Melbourne does not charge for service. So you pop in, you land in Melbourne, and then you disperse to your domestic location. One of the other ways to skin that cat would be to significantly increase our user fee costs. Right now, we have about 90 international flights on an annual basis up till the COVID suspension. And so if you take that 90, divide it by the number, the estimated cost that we have, and we say use about 175,000, you're talking about a landing or fee of around $3,000. So that number could be big enough for users to say, not going to land in Leesburg, we'll go to Melbourne and then come back to Leesburg. So I think there's a lot of things in there. Tracy's been in touch with some of the primary users that use the airport internationally, and she's also been in touch with Lester Coggins, who is the chief aviation guy over there at the Villages.
So Al, when do you need to make a decision, or when should we make a decision on yay or nay?
Fall, yeah, later in August.
Okay.
So it'll probably be more of a decision or kick the can down the road, however loose Homeland Security lets us be.
Anything else on the airport?
I was just going to add on the customs, maybe we could get a recommendation from the Airport Advisory Board by then too.
Have they given you an official one yet?
Did they have?
But if it's not going to be feasible anymore, then let them use Melbourne.
And I think sometimes we make decisions, we don't have all the information as to how much it's going to cost to renovate a building, the user fee, and it goes from 90 if you go 3,000, when you go from 90 to 50, and would it make sense? So for me, I would like to have all the information, who the 3 users are, you know, their commitment level to paying for wherever we go, as opposed to us making a decision saying we got 3 users. I don't know who the 3 users are. Will they put up their money? Will they sign a contract? They're going to continue? Or if FAA, which we have no control, simply says that you're still restricted for another year, then we're still going to be stuck. So I think, you know, until we get that information from Homeland Security and the 3 major users, because, I mean, you're talking about the entire city. You got 3 users who use the airport. Do we spend $300,000 on renovating the building for 3 companies? So I think that has to be a commitment level from those 3 major users before we can really make a big decision on something of that nature. So I would like to see all that brought back to us when we do decide on it.
We are on the same page.
Thank you, sir.
And that's a pot that is on the front of Tracy's range.
And we'll also get some information on what user fees are charged elsewhere.
Yeah, we can do that too.
Right. Okay.
With the airport, we move into the pensions, and you know, basically quick reviews of those. We've got the 3 pensions: the police pension, the fire pension, and then the general employee pension, which is closed. And essentially, your levels of funding are 92.5 for the police, 83.7 for fire, and 94.2 for the general fund. So those are all solid numbers.
Is that the percentage you usually have them every year?
I'm
That fund?
sorry, Mayor, I didn't catch.
Is that the percentage that they're usually at every year? You don't go over
They've
100?
been pretty consistent. I don't think we've seen a lot of flex, and the magic number is 80%.
Okay.
So here's your police pension breakdown, where the money comes in: insurance premium money, interest earnings, employee contributions, and then the city contribution. And you note this year in police we went down from 14.5 to 11.2.
Why would you decrease it when?
Earnings up.
Okay.
So the actuarial report takes all those things into
Okay,
account.
I see that. Thank you.
So that'll probably go up next year, since they were down for the quarter this year. So that's that game. Fire.
Is your goal to get to 100 ever, or is it just to stay that 80, 90%?
I don't think you need to be at 100, is my opinion.
Okay,
And B, to get to 100, that's going to be on the city's response. You would have to increase the city contribution to get to 100.
This is how it
because
works.
because you're going to get a fixed amount from the state on the insurance proceeds. You get a fixed amount from your employees based on the CBAs. And so if it's determined that we want to be at 100, then that's going to be our decision to do that. And I wouldn't advise that.
But this, our numbers are consistent with other municipalities?
Yeah, I think your numbers are good compared to other municipalities.
Okay, thank you.
And then finally, you got the GE General Employees Pension. Are there any questions on the pension funds? And then we jump into the internal funds. And the trickiest one there is the health insurance fund. The health insurance fund this year, obviously, we talked a little bit about it. We're budgeting and picking up that 15% increase. And as far as the cash level there, you're right about where you need to be. So the health insurance fund remains a little bit tricky and one we're going to have to watch in out years. I would say this year we're probably good to go. The big thing that we still continue to see there is some high exposures on some claims, and probably, I think I said this last year, but probably going to need to be a review of the retirement program in there.
Yeah, I bring it up every year. I think it's absolutely insane that we have health insurance we provide health insurance for retirees if they want it. So like someone over 65 that no longer works for the city, they can stay on our insurance, which I think, I've never understood that.
Say that again?
Yeah, I know.
I just want to be sure I heard you right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Al, but once you're retired, you can stay on the city's insurance.
You use it as a supplemental. So we have 2 retiree programs. Let's say 3. The city had an incentive where, and by the way, this plan is now stopped as of employees hired after October 1, 2008, so fiscal year 9, the city stopped this. However, you still have 162 employees who are potentially eligible for this program. Everybody else is now not. So, for example, I don't know, I'm not eligible. Brandy is. Okay. In any case, here's the tiers. Tier 1 is if you're age 52 and have 30 years of service, you are eligible for the city's $400 a month to offset your insurance costs. That $400, when this issue came up, Commissioner Roebuck brought it up, we put a opener of the $400, which allowed those retired employees to go and take the $400 and use it as an FSA, flexible spending account. So you didn't have to stay in our program, but you could take this $400 and go somewhere else, which actually we thought would try to help us. A couple of employees did that. The second tier of employee is 58 and 20 years of service. Am I right on that one? Where's Melissa? 15. So 58 and 15, you can retire early and be eligible to the same program. And then when you reach retirement at 65, you can do that. So in all, we have 100.
So that 65 age group, did not matter how long they worked for the city. Is that the complaint?
Right.
Or
No, the complaint is once you're at 65, you're still eligible. You can be on Medicare and supplement with city, and then the city's supplementing what Medicare doesn't, and then that shifts healthcare costs to us, which is one of the reasons.
But was there a requirement for a number of years of service?
No, after 65, you're eligible for the retirement program.
Irrespective if you work for the city, irrespective if you work for a city for 1 year or 30 years.
Is there a number on that?
Okay. I was just trying to understand.
So Commissioner,
Okay.
15. So it's 58 and
I got it,
15,
I got it.
or 65 and 15.
Okay, thank you.
so Commissioner Robert, your issue is at 65, they should simply be on Medicare.
Unless they still work here. If they still work here, then
Right.
whatever they want to do is fine. I don't think that if you're 65 and you're retired, I don't think the city should be paying for your health insurance.
So what's the standard, the normal standard, Al? Is that normal?
I'm gonna say, I don't think that that's a normal program. I'd have to look into that.
Can you look in and also look at the cost that it costs if we're saying 65 Medicare and the city? How much does it cost the city for the employees that we currently have and the ones that are eligible?
Let me do this. Yes is the answer. I think as far as a budgeting process, we go forward as this is now. But I think this next year, we need to take a hard look at that program. Because 2 years into this, we're really, we've tried to encourage this.
Can I ask a favor? Can we not wait till next budget year? Can we do it like next month and 2 months
I
later?
think you need to
Because I know
do it-
Commissioner Roebuck has brought this up like 3 years, and we do it every year at budget time, and then we say, okay, let's keep it, and we'll talk about it, and then we get to the next year. So can we really work on it and
I
have
think
even if it's a
we will bring
workshop?
you a good report probably in the next 60 days with some recommendations, but I think the recommendations will be pretty draconian, which will stir up a lot of conversation and bring a lot of retirees into the commission room, which is, I think, a good thing. And so I think with whatever you do, you're probably going to have to provide some reasonable notice to those employees. That's, I think we need to make some hard decisions. I think we need to talk about it soon. I think we need to have that hard meeting, and then we need to give good lead time to help people kind of ease into this, because I do see a change needs to come.
Because the problem is that for everyone that works here, we had to spend almost $1,000 for every employee on their health insurance when we could have been giving that to salary if we had had a lower, a more reasonable health numbers, right? So by letting them stay on, we're basically taking away wages from current employees in my.
You can explain it that way. Essentially what you see happening is you see that about 41% of our major claims are going to a fifth of our employees, and that fifth is retired. And that fifth is driving our cost up.
Well, most people get sick when they get past 65, so.
That's great.
So you see the battle lining up. Is we've had this historic program for a long time, and it's catching up with us. And it's either A, your existing employees, or the city has to continually feed into this, or we got a way to reduce those claims if those claims aren't getting better through the circular process.
And gosh, I don't know as much as I should on the insurance side, but couldn't they go to Medicare and we could do some kind of supplemental that would be advantageous to them and still save us money? And I'm way out of my...
The issue is that Medicare is not picking up those costs because we are the supplemental. And so I think probably one of the veils of a recommendation that you will see to ease into this is you continue to pay the $400, but you don't let them into, right now it's flexible. We give you $400 and you say you can be in our plan, or you can go spend your $400 somewhere else and go get supplemental. I think probably your first step to fix this is I give you $400,
Or
but
bump
you're
it.
out.
Yeah, or
you
bump
have
it.
to do an FSA.
Yeah, or bump it and incent them. I mean, I don't want to pull the rug out from under these people and.
Well,
do it.
that's I
But I
think
mean,
that's the issue you got to
We
talk
can
about.
transition it over a few years. I respect the comments of the commission. And now I hear all these cost numbers. I agree. We've got to look at it in some form or fashion. And I just feel like we need to leverage Medicare. That's where I thought almost everybody went to Medicare at 65.
Yeah, and if we gave them the $400, that's what they would do, is then go buy a supplemental Medicare plan. What they could do, I should say, to Medicare Advantage, I think.
These are the things the collective bargaining agreement needs, because the $400 isn't buying a nice supplemental plan is what you're getting from us.
So is it all city employees, or is it just the police and fire under the?
All city employees hired prior to October 1, 2008. You've got 500, there's the rough numbers, you got about 550 employees in the plan. The group is about 1,200 people, and of the 500, about 160 are one of those three levels of retiree: 52 and 30, 58 and 15, or 65 and 15.
And what's happening with the cost is that, so it's something like, you know, like 90% of medical costs occur in the last 3 months of life, or directionally around there. And so it's not that they're getting better care during those 3 months of life, it's that when they're in the hospital for those last 3 months, Medicare's paying the first bill, and then the hospital says, oh, wait, you've got supplemental insurance, we can bill some more. So let's send the city of Leesburg a bill. They'll pay it, which we have to. So it's not even, you know, in the dollars aren't coming from reduced care, it's coming from a second person that's able to bill. Now, there is some reduced care prior to that, but that's not what's actually costing the money to the plan.
Well, I see why it's a complicated one, but I agree. I think we need to try and tackle it in some form or fashion and be fair to the long-term employees, you know, find some kind of compromise.
So we'll be back to you. We'll put that on the agenda coming up. We'll either workshop it or try to find a regular meeting where we got a little bit of a break, but we do need to have a significant conversation about that.
And I would just add, you know, I see the city's absorbing all the costs this year, and I think that's admirable, but in corporate America, it's, you know, employees are having to pick it up. It's brutal, you know, in corporate America, what people get hit with every year on medical insurance. It's a big hot button. I mean, I think our plan's pretty generous.
Why is the wellness clinic increasing so much?
So the wellness center budget last year, they came in at the 781,079. And then we also have to pay other things out like janitorial, fiber, computers. So when we did this budget, we didn't include all that in it. Now, it's pretty much the same budget for the wellness center, but then you got to tack on, now we've got janitorial and things like that. So they're not necessarily asking for an increase. I think we just missed it a little bit last year when we did that wellness, but we've been all over it today, and that's kind of what we've come up with. Okay, so, I mean, but you can see the good thing is that we only got to 770 in 19, so, you know, we might be okay, you know what I mean? So I think it's fine. It just might have been a bad budget in 20.
Next internal fund is workers' comp. Really no report for you on that, unless you have any questions there. And then the risk management fund is the same. And then
Is the risk management, that's the increased insurance mostly from the new facilities? Is that what that?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thanks.
And then we hit it up with just kind of a wrap up, and really only two areas to wrap up, or well, three. One is Commissioner Roebuck had the question on the wet slips. So Travis went back, we did a quick survey on that, and we're recommending that you increase your wet slip fees by 3%. These numbers are hard to read. You have the chart up there in front of you. But if we increase 3% for commercial boats, we'll be at $755 a foot. For non-residential, we'll be at $719, and for residential, we'll be at $685. So all of those three numbers are up towards the top of the scale, and we talked about that because we had 40 slips, we have 100%, and have maintained that occupancy. So we're recommending 3%. Civic funding also came up. Oh, I'm going backwards. Civic funding also came up. So we added the three groups that the commission wanted for one-time increases: Leesburg Art, the Melon Patch, and the band, to those levels, 15.
Al, while you're there, let me just
10,
interject you for a
6.
few moments. For the CDC, I didn't interject anything, but the CDC's fund is for the Black Heritage Festival. And I don't know with the pandemic if it's going to be a festival in February, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask for an additional increase for the CDC. Whether it's a festival or not, we'll return 1,200, but I think I would like to see the CDC at 5,000.
Okay, we'll make that change, and that'll go back to the solid waste and fund and that. And then you have, of course, the partnership discussion. So the 4 groups that have changed or the 5, you got the watch on the partnership. Didn't mean it's kind of like that. You've got Leesburg Art Festival at 15. We bumped up the theater to 10, the band to 12, and the CDC to 5.
I think the band is
That's
6,400.
Yeah, I said the wrong number. Okay, so that wraps up civic funding. One.
Say, I don't think you take action, but the partnership, their board did vote not to bring the main street manager back after our,
Wow.
kind of direction. I will say, I think that was partly due because the executive board put forward a proposal that would have been insulting to the main street manager. But I had a good conversation with, Lena Williams, who will be the incoming president. And I know she's looking at some stuff that I'm hoping that we can have some better news soon, but that's where they are right now.
And you can always just leave that for now, and when you visit this in September, you can revisit that in the final draft. And then to sum up is get back to the tax rate and the good old DR 420, which we send off to the revenue form that we send off to the tax collector that says this is what your millage rate is going to be as a maximum so that you can do the trim notice. And we're going to propose this year that you do the rollback number as your maximum millage rate. So that's not going to give you any wiggle room as we move forward. But I think we've made a lot of promises in the past months and throughout this process that we were going to get to the rollback, we were going to do rate reductions, we did a lot of quid pro quos. So I think the wisest thing to do, even though it ties your hands a little bit, is to do the DR 420 with your maximum tax rate being the rollback rate at 4.086. As long as there's a consensus amongst you tonight, the DR 420 will be on the July 27 agenda for you to formally approve, and then pending that approval, we have to get that report back to the tax office by August 3rd. And with that,
If I could ask a question, and this is going back in another meeting. On the Greater Leesburg CRA fund, why is there $250,000 in operating expenses? What is included with that?
So the increment of the downtown CRA is about, so it's 2.25, so it's about 450-ish, 500,000 is what we get from our incremental funding, and then the county's incremental funding, and then the CDC decree with the city of Leesburg is the CDC gets half of that, so that 2.25 is the payment to the CDC, and then the CRA is left with another 2.25, which we mostly spend on debt. I think was like 100, and then there's another 100 that we're recommending this year to spend on the design plan for Canal and Dixie.
Okay. All right, thank
So
you.
it's like 4 things you spend it on this year.
Thanks. Any other comments, questions?
I'm just going to add one thing. Al knows I can't go through this whole budget without bringing this up, but looking how tight things are, the charge-offs on the electric side just continue to drive me crazy. And Al and I've talked about it one-on-one, and I just would like to see us tackle that in some form or fashion. I mean, with such a tight budget, we're sitting here talking now, we think it's going to be $500,000 next year. I'm betting that's a conservative number, and there's just so many ways we could spend that money, and just to me, it's just another government handout. And I've told Al, I just don't like losing money.
Look, if
I'll be quiet right there.
The city struggled with that, okay, with write-offs in the past, and it's a double-edged sword. And so if the write-offs are that distasteful, go back to how we kept them lower. No, they didn't go away. They were lower. You're going to have a write-off. You will not get everybody to pay their bills. It's not going to happen. But you can get them lower. And how did we do that in the past? We increased the deposits. And we had this crazy deposit policy where we lost employees, where the commission got huge complaints, and where our deposit policy was extremely vigorous and rough. But when we had high deposits, we had low write-offs. Because we sat on people's coins. But then instead, what you're going to get is we had this red light, yellow light, green light deposit way, where if you had bad credit, you had deposit of $500. It was huge. And then we sat on that for 3 years or 2 years. I'm not making this up. And that was an onerous deposit policy. But our write-offs were about half.
So that gives me $250,000 to spend toward everybody in the city and improve my city. And you know it's one of my hot buttons.
And then you get back to your phone will ring, the businesses will complain. And that was the first that started it, was with the mall. The mall thought our deposits were onerous, and they couldn't get that mall redeveloped. So it's a trade-off. If write-offs are that bad, I'm going to say go back and look at the deposit policies. I would recommend that the $200,000 extra we're spending a year on write-offs is well worth taking the load off our customer service department, putting goodwill out to the community so that you've got an easy hookup policy, helping your businesses out by not, jamming them with big deposits. And so that's the trade-off.
What if they built them up over time? I mean, I'm not trying to get to zero. I mean, I am a realist. You and I have had this conversation. We went through budget last year, it jumped out at me. I look at budget this year and I see the importance of what I could do with a couple $100,000 and just with you've heard my talk. I just don't like losing money in that form or fashion. Enough said.
And what part of money, that's in the electric department, right? The write-offs?
It's all your utilities.
So
electric, water, sewer, gas, solid waste.
So we'll still be kind of restricted on where we could do with that money, except give it back to the gas department, the electric department, and we're talking about $38 million in wholesale. So it won't be, we can say, well, here's $500,000, let's give it to the Sleepy Hollow project. I mean, unless we do another transfer, then Dan's gonna go crazy, but we try to transfer extra money. But I think, we've been, Al is right, we've done a deposit. I think when I opened up a child care business, my deposit was $1,900 to turn my lights on. So most businesses can't operate, and you'll be amazed when we look at the write-offs. It's not Susie down the street, it's the business that we're saying, let me give you another month. Well, that business has an electric gas bill of $5,000, so in 2 months he's at $10,000. For Susie has a $300 bill. So we can get 10 Susies for one business guy. So you got to decide now, do we want to really do that deposit? Then we had a thing also where we were turning people's lights off a month and a half. So we shortened that down. We did all kind of things to try to turn them off faster to try to help. And Al's right, customer service was going crazy, the residents were going crazy. People moved to Leesburg and said, oh my God, I'm going to go rent Dan's house, and because Dan had parties all night, his electric bill averaged $500. So we set 2.5 times Dan's bill. So when I rent my house and Dan lived there, you paying $1,000 to rent the house. So it was just a methodical nightmare, and we all complained about the write-offs for years, but I think our staff has done a decent job trying to mitigate and, like Al say, kind of make it easy for customer service and for the city and not lose as much money. But I think now it's kind of hard with COVID-19 really trying to decide, is it a COVID issue or is it just people just saying, I'm not paying my bill?
Well, be careful what I say here, but I anticipate a lot of abuse of the system and people leveraging COVID, and I see some trouble on the horizon the next 6 months. I guess I just feel like we need to reevaluate and toughen up a little bit. And hearing John's comments, I'm probably less sensitive to turning power off on a business. That's probably easier for me than a household. So I don't have a lot of patience for them going past due. They hit 30 days, I'd cut them off.
Would it be possible to maybe reach out to the FMPA and get some idea on what write-offs are as a percentage of sales for the other members?
Yep.
I mean, we're running about 0.0025.
And that's what Al always reminds me. That's how
Yeah.
Al gets me settled down with that number. And then I counter with, I still don't like losing money, Al.
Right. I mean, I just, I mean, I look, 0.0025, I don't know whether that's a good number or not. I know in our business, 0.002 is kind of like the gold standard, so.
I'll take point one, that sounds good to me.
Yeah, I think if you look,
I really don't know, but I would be curious at what the other utilities are doing, because if it's significantly different than us, then that's something we should consider.
Sorry, Al.
I owe you 2 reports now.
What's that?
I owe you 2 reports.
Okay, you knew we're not going to get through this without me bringing it. I was going to let it go, I just couldn't.
Okay, any more questions, comments?
All right, well, we got a couple things to bring back to you in workshop, and
Right.
then I think we're pretty square, other than a couple long-term issues, and we'll revisit this with the modifications in September.